The topic that I shall be talking upon, inflammation and novel targeted cardiovascular disorders. Again, this is an innovation in a different sense because this is not a novel idea at all. Inflammation and infection as a part of atherosclerosis and acute coronary syndromes have been there for a very long time. They came, they went away, and they have again come back because people have realized that in spite of all the risk factor profiling that we do, there is something that is missing, and there is something that just cannot explain why the events occur suddenly and in an unexplained fashion. So a lot of basic science and biology has gone into understanding the whole process of atherosclerosis and acute coronary syndrome, and therein the whole concept of inflammation and thereby probably getting anti-inflammatories has come back into vogue. And this is again a way of innovating an idea, or let me say getting an idea back into the stream and probably treating it in a much better way. Nothing new. We know that diabetes, dyslipidemia, hypertension, hemostatic thrombotic factors, behavioral factors, inflammatory factors, demographics and genetics, of course, they play a major role as far as the incidence of coronary disease and atherosclerosis go in general. A lot of data, South Asians, Indians in particular, at any part of the world, the globe, they are always at a much higher risk for coronary disease as compared to local population. So much for the genetic factor. Then comes the behavioral factor. We have data to show that even psychosocial factors, they amount majorly in causing ACS and in the progression of CAD. But although it is said that cardiovascular diseases are the leading cause of death globally, 31%, India also being a leading cause of death, still only 12 to 16% of these patients are young, less than 40 years, but I think in India it is growing much more. Higher the risk score, higher the rate, but 60% of those who develop these events have only one or even none of these risk factors. A lot of young patients, UNS are seeing less than 40, less than 30, in their 20s, coming to us with acute coronary syndromes, no risk factors, non-diabetic, non-hypertensive, lipid profile being normal, occasional smokers, tobacco chewers, a variety of demographics coming from a village, from a town, from a city, a variety of demographics. Something is missing, something is going on. Traditional teaching, traditional thinking of risk factor profiling doesn't work in these patients. We in fact studied risk factor profiling in our young patients in our ICU, less than 40 years of age, and we came to the conclusion that these risk factors really don't work. There is something beyond these risk factors that are causing these events, and probably that is where inflammation comes into picture. When we look at the cycle of atherosclerosis, from a normal artery to an early atheroma to a vulnerable plaque, which might either stabilize or would rupture, leading to an event. That's a standard cycle that an artery, an atheroma, and a plaque undergoes over a period of time. Way back in 19th century, Robert Virchow had said that inflammation-based arterial changes as a mechanism of primary importance in atherosclerosis. It was long back it was realized that there is something going on in the arteries that is causing the ruptures, that is causing the events, and that is causing patients to die suddenly. It is not, we know from a very long time, 90% stenosis, they don't cause MIs. It is those 20%, 30% plaques, 40% plaque that rupture suddenly and they cause acute MIs. So there is something that causes those ruptures, and that is called inflammation. Having known this, still today we don't have any therapeutic intervention available to subside or to control this inflammation. Of course, we have statins, we have aspirin, we have clopidogrel to a certain extent which helps, but nothing in particular which can try and dissipate the inflammation and prevent the incidence of acute coronary syndromes in these patients. If you look at the lifeline, the atherogenosis, we know that the basic premise, the serum LDL goes up, inflammation occurs in the presence of oxidation, free radical formation, there is a formation of foam cell, linear streak, cell proliferation, calcification, so on and so forth. It's a vicious cycle that goes on, and at some point of time, there is a rupture, ACS, and the patient ends up with an event. Again, a slide, I think, which Dr. Bhatnagar has already touched upon, selectins, ICAMs, VCAMs, MCPs, they all play their roles in causing inflammation, in letting the monocytes in, the oxidized LDL causing the macrophages to get activated, leading to the release of selectins and the interleukins, thereby causing adhesions and leading a cascade of platelet aggregation and atherothrombosis. Reduced nitric oxide bioactivity, increased oxidative stress. There are a lot of stimulators that cause inflammation in their own ways and that lead to an event that occurs because of that. I'll just run through the slides. An activated monocyte that gets into the cell wall. In the present renal dysfunction, you have the LDL going in. When it gets oxidized, there is a trigger, and the oxidized LDL itself acts as a trigger for inflammation, leading to monocytes getting converted into macrophages. Again, Dr. Bhatnagar has touched upon them, dendritic cells, the NFKB, two pathways that lead to inflammation and lead to events, and this is where I think people are working on. Having realized that there are pathways of inflammation which we can identify, which we can pick up those molecules and thereby control, this is where most of the work in basic science and inflammation is going on. I think that is where companies like Cadila do come in, but they are trying to get inflammation under control, and probably by doing that they're trying to get the overall event rates coming down. Right, so inflammation of course is a culprit. Another slide that shows that in dysfunction there's increased endothelial permeability, there's migration of leukocytes, addition leads to a fatty streak formation. Mind you, fatty streaks have been seen in children as less as 8 to 10 years of age. Foam cell formation doesn't begin at 40, fatty streaks are there right since childhood, and therefore nowadays we believe that atherosclerosis is a disease of children. It's a pediatric disease. It's not an adult disease. We don't see atherosclerosis beginning at 30 or 40. It starts way back when you're children. Therefore, the whole issue of childhood obesity, and therefore the issue that children have to be healthy. If children are healthy today, probably 15 years down the line, 20 years down, we have a healthy population. And one of the reasons why we are seeing a spurt in acute MIs and ACAs in young individuals today is probably because of our culture, which promotes a lot of sort of what was healthy food. Your kids have to be chubby, they have to be, they should look healthy, they should look khate pite ghar ka, so you keep on feeding them with a lot of love, butter, ghee, cheese, and ultimately they land up with dysfunction, and the increased event rates that I see could be secondary to our own cultural values that our children have imbibed. Of course, that leads to advanced complicated lesion, unstable fibrous caps, ruptures, ACS, so on and so forth. Various markers have been seen, and they have been touted as predictors for cardiovascular risk. We have the additional molecules, the cytokines, reactants, fibrinogen, CRP, leukocyte count, ESR, so on and so forth. A lot of other markers. HSCRP is one of the very crucial markers that have been studied intensively, not only as a marker but also as a molecule for target for therapy. Stromatolysine, carbogenase, elastase, interleukin-1, LDH-CK, TROP5, they are all molecules that tell us that inflammation is going at some point of time. When you look at this graph, although it's a busy graph, I'll just say that if you look at the overall the picture, a total of HSCRP with a cholesterol agent ratio probably gives you a best available relative risk for developing the first acute coronary event. So if you have a patient whose cholesterol level is high, and HSCRP which is high, probably you're looking at a patient who will infarct very soon. Other markers that are there which have been studied extensively, and of course HSCRP is one that probably more than a marker is also taking part in the disease as such. Therefore, it has been studied extensively and therefore trying to be controlled. A lot of data available, HSCRP risk for future MI. You can see there's a gradation as far as acute MI is concerned. With stroke, the gradation is very steep. You have a single step going up and the stroke level is almost similar for all of the rises for HSCRP. Future MI again, with aspirin of course you can see that the rates of MI goes down, and therefore aspirin has been touted as one of the molecules that can probably control inflammation as shown by HSCRP levels coming down. Interleukin-6 again is another molecule that has been studied extensively, has been shown to cause acute events. 2003 CDC and AHA very clearly said that measurement of HSCRP may help predict further evaluation therapy in primary prevention because it adds to the risk stratification. 2010 ACC AHA guidelines for assessment of cardiovascular risk again said that measure CRP in definitely healthy elderly people to identify cardiovascular risk. Patients who have events, they don't need to be measured for HSCRP because they have to be put on statins anyway. People who have not had events, But if you want to look for risk stratification, go for HSCRP. The HSCRP is negative. Most likely these patients are not at very high risk and probably they don't need extensive statin therapy to begin with. 2013, use of HSCRP for stratifying the high-risk patients with atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease is a must and therefore should be done for passivation of inflammation and the plaque that will. Another concept of Reynolds risk score. We know Framingham scoring, but this is a risk score which takes Framingham score, age, gender, smoking status, systolic blood pressure, cholesterol, HDL especially, HSCRP, and if your parents had a heart attack before age of 60 years. This is supposed to be a better risk predictor in patients who come to us for risk evaluation. Framingham is limited. We don't have too much of interplay in this, but here you're adding an inflammatory molecule, you're adding a history of premature CAD in the first degree relatives, and of course looking at HDL, which has not been looked at earlier. Earlier they looked at LDL, they looked at serum cholesterol, but HDL is something they looked into this. A very recent article in Circulation has said that the Reynolds risk score was better calibrated than the Framingham model in large acceleration cohort, and probably to start statin therapy more than FRS, this is probably a better risk scoring system and should be employed in all of our patients who are looking for risk stratification. Okay. Canadian guidelines, again, they have said that high risk, Reynolds score more than 20, FRS more than 20%, definitely patients should be high dose statins. Inflammation, atherothrombosis, vascular prevention, three questions. Is there evidence that individuals with elevated risk of inflammatory biomarkers are at high vascular risk even when other risk factors are acceptable? Yes. Enough data is available. LDL normal, say patient is young age, non-smoker, non-diabetic, non-hypertensive, but HSCRP high, interleukin 6 high, yes, the patient could be at high incidence of events. Is there evidence that individuals identified an increased risk due to inflammation benefit from a therapy they otherwise would not have received? Again, yes. All those patients who have been studied with HSCRP being on the higher side, given statins, given aspirin, have benefited in the sense that they have not progressed to an acute event in future, and therefore probably that is where the answer to our questions lie. So inflammation may determine the plaque stability and it may of course help in telling you which patients are high risk, low risk, and lipid lowering may reduce plaque inflammation, statins and other molecules may come into picture. So looking at all this information on inflammation, atherosclerosis, what the current therapies available, of course, statins rule the roost. We know that they work at various levels. Pleiotropic effects are well known as anti-inflammatories, as early-reducing therapies, as patients to stabilize plaques. Is the number one molecule that are there. Also that are being studied is canakinumab, again biological, which is again an inhibitor, a molecule which is trying to get inflammation down. We have the antiplatelets, aspirin, other antiplatelets available now. We have clopidogrel, we have prasugrel, we have ticagrelor, they again work on platelets and help them. The TPR gamma agonist, they work on the macrophages, again they cause reduced inflammation. Still, we have another pathway, the kinase pathway and the NFKB pathway, which is left untouched. But these therapies that are currently available, and probably that is why these therapies are not enough to stop the progression of ACS that we are seeing. So what can be done? When you look at the NFKB pathway, what Dr. Bhatnagar touched upon, curcumin again is one molecule that can work on this pathway, and probably along with statins, along with antiplatelets, along with other therapies for stabilization, could be one molecule that could work in tandem, for example, to control inflammation in a much bigger way. 3-HAA anti-inflammatory metabolites also come into play, and they could also play a major role in controlling inflammation, thereby going for these events. So where do we stand today? Current targets, statins, apoproteins, HSCRP, ACE, ARBs, again, pleiotropic effects, they work on vascular endothelium, they improve adrenal dysfunction, therefore they are supposed to be beneficials. Antiplatelets, PPR gamma agonist, we have canakinumab, it is still being studied. CRP, IL-6, methotrexate again has been studied in few studies, have been shown to be beneficial. Novel targets which we are looking at currently are the 3-HAA anti-inflammatory metabolites, and of course curcumin, which is the NFKB anti-inflammatory molecule, and that could come into picture. Just a word about canakinumab. It's a high affinity human monoclonal antibody which works against interleukin-1 beta, and it has a long half-life, 4 weeks, it's CRP and IL-6 reduction for up to 3 months. So it is being studied. Probably future could see one of these molecules coming into picture to help in preventing inflammation and probably thereby reducing the number of acute coronary events that we are looking at. various therapies are available: statins, TNF inhibition, IL-6 inhibition, LDL low-dose methotrexate, and IL-1 inhibition. There have been issues with almost all of these medications. Low-dose methotrexate probably seems to be the safest of all these, but again, methotrexate in itself has its own problems and therefore cannot be prescribed to general population as such. So two pathways, the kinase pathway and the NF-κ beta pathway is what remains. In this pathway, one major molecule that is of interest is the 3-hydroxy oxyanthramic acid, which is a target and which needs to be controlled if you want to control inflammation in a major way. I'll not go into details, this is basic science, but suffice to say that it plays an important role in immune regulation, and probably by getting this under control, you may have a better control of inflammation, of lipids, and of course atherosclerosis and of inflammation in general. So 3-HH is an intermediate product of kinase pathway, clinically significant benefits in powerful inhibitor of atherosclerotic lesions. Beneficial effects on lipid metabolism with reduced LDL chylomicron and increased HDL levels, significantly reduces Barton inflammation, therefore it's a pleiotropic effect. Similar slide, nothing new, NF-κ pathway, Dr. Bhatnagar touched upon that. The pathway, basically it causes activation of additional molecules and pro-inflammatory cytokines, and what curcumin does is it prevents the activation of these molecules, thereby reduces inflammation and stops the pathway from coming up. In cardiovascular diseases, it has an inflammatory role, reduces the CRP, reduced amino acid with CABG. Enough data available now. We have data from India, from Europe, from US also. Reduces serum cholesterol, improves alveolar function, prevents production of diabetic nephropathy, and reduces fasting blood glucose and A1C insulin index as such. The antioxidant effects of curcumin have been shown to attenuate adrenomycin-induced cardiotoxicity. Again, it's an area of concern that not many molecules are available, and the only thing is that you need to stop adrenomycin and probably just wait for it to come back. But curcumin could be again an area where it could come into help. May prevent diabetic cardiovascular complications. Again, a grey zone, because most of the diabetes are going to die of cardiovascular problems, not because of diabetes as such. So probably starting curcumin in those patients may help. Antithrombotic, anti-proliferative, anti-inflammatory effects may cause reduction in these events with sclerosis and the acute coronary syndromes, and they may have a possibility of preventing atrial as well as ventricular arrhythmia. These are all data that have come in from various studies across the globe and that have shown that just by their pleiotropic effects, these things are possible. I'll not go into details. They have shown various pathways that cause anti-inflammation, prevents cardiac hypertrophy, prevents cardiac fibrosis, and of course, potential anti-atherogenic effect that curcumin could have. Other promising therapies, some therapies such as cyclosporin, colchicine may have benefits being studied, we don't know. Methotrexate again is a potential cardioprotective anti-inflammatory effect to increase FMC levels, therefore cannot be given to one at all. Various trials going on, TETHI, the CIRT, the CANTO study for canakinumab, and other trials that will look into chemokines and the interleukins in general. To conclude, despite optimum therapy with current drugs, still nearly a third of low-risk individuals with 0 to 1 fanning of the scoring factor have been known to develop atherosclerotic CVD, which is unexplained. We don't know why that happens. Tackling inflammation provides the potential to improve cardiovascular outcomes further. Some molecules targeting inflammation are being developed to provide a unique addition to cardiovascular membrane, and probably that is what the future holds. Just a word. Nowadays, when we do an angiogram in a lot of young patients, I mean, Dr. Dani or Vipul is here, I think he would also agree. We see a lot of what I call as angry disease. You see a diffuse sort of a disease in those vessels, 38-year-old, 40-year-old, 45-year-old, triple vessel disease, not having any risk factors. And somehow, just a picture of that particular angiogram, the arterial tree, it elicits in you that this could be an inflammatory event. Something is there that's causing such a high level of inflammation, thereby leading to the dysfunction, thereby leading to this particular disease. So probably, inflammation is something that we all as clinicians should look at, not only for atherosclerosis in general, but for various other disorders that are going on in our body, systemic disorders, put infection apart, but say non-infectious disorders, probably inflammation does play a major role in getting these things going. And I thank you for a very kind attention. I also think that since Cadila is in the process of developing curcumin as clinicians, we would like to know that, I don't think we are a part of any trials as far as the cardiovascular disease is concerned, but we would definitely like to know where Curcumin stand at this point of time as far as cardiovascular therapy is concerned and where we can take it from there. Thank you very much.